How can I get the future I want? That's the big question, isn't it? Can I make what I want to happen really happen? This is the third and final talk in our series called Back to the Future, which is my all-time favourite film trilogy because I love time travel fantasy. The whole idea of the film is that we can change what happens in the future. The hero, Marty McFly, has a scientist friend, Doc Emmett Brown, who invents a time machine. And in this time machine, they go back to the past and influence a different course of action to create a different outcome in the future. Then they visit the future to find out what happened so they can then go back to the past or the present and change it again. In the final scene, spoiler alert, Marty and his girlfriend have been to the future and discovered that in the future he's going to be fired from his job. He finds out in the future that he allows himself to be goaded by a friend on a video call into doing something illegal. But his future boss has secretly listened to the call and sends him a printed message, "You're fired." So when they get back to the present, Marty decides to make a different choice. And as a result, that piece of paper they brought back from the future that says "you're fired" becomes blank. And his girlfriend exclaims, "It's erased." And Marty's scientist friend, the doc, says, "Of course it's erased. Now your future will be whatever you make it. So make it a good one." That's a very attractive idea, isn't it? Controlling your future. The only problem is that we don't have a time machine. We don't know what's going to happen, and there's nothing we can do that gives us that control. So what can we do to make a difference to our future? I do some coaching and mentoring, and one of the most common questions that people ask is, how can I make the right choice for my future in this situation? What is the best thing for me to do? And I often see people trying to work through all the variables that affect their situation, weighing up the pros and the cons, assessing the risks against the opportunities, and even asking themselves if this is what they really want. The trouble is that life is complex and making choices is often hard. The complexity of life means that weighing all the upside and the downsides of situations can be overwhelming. And trying to exert control can become a huge burden because there are so many things, in fact, we cannot control. I can't control which day I was born or the parents I have. I can't control the way other people feel or their habits, like the way they drive. And I can't control the big global events like the pandemic. Some years ago, I was walking in the grounds of an old abbey and I came across a gravestone with two names, both exactly the same, a father and a son. And they had all the same names, the exact same middle names. Now, of course, it's not uncommon to pass family names through the generations. Americans often do this by adding numbers like Charles Tucker III. But this gravestone had no numbers. The father and the son just had identical names. And as I looked at it, I thought, the father must have been so proud of his son. This was his family's future. And maybe he felt in a way he could perpetuate his identity through his name. Then I spotted it. The son had died before the father. How tragic. Whatever the father had hoped for the future was lost because he couldn't control how long his son lived. Our future is uncertain and we don't know how our choices will turn out in the end. I wonder what choices you're facing. After lockdown, a lot of people are wondering where to go on holiday, but there are more important things than that. What about where your life heads in the future? What about the relationships that are important to you? What about your personal development and your work? What choices do you have financially? Our relationships, our children, our health, our career, our finances are all really important. Sometimes people come to a decision about something, but they're still not sure about it. And I often ask them, now that you've finished your thinking, what do you feel in your heart about this? Because there's something deeper than analysis, isn't there? When we make a key decision about the future, especially one that affects our relationships or our future direction, we need more than an intellectual conclusion, because there's more to us than just rationality. That doesn't mean we park our brain thinking is important. It just means that to be fully human is to recognize that we are more than just our minds and bodies. Yes, we have the capacity to reason, but we also have intuition, we have imagination and feelings, and there's something more, something hard to define, but real. Sometimes we can have done all our thinking and have all our ducks in a row, so to speak, but still not enjoy peace about a decision. And that can be an indication that something isn't right. There's a spiritual side to us that is the essence of who we are. And when we reach a conclusion that we know to be right, there's often an inner resonance within us, a deep conviction of inner peace about that course of action, even if it's not an easy course to take. A clue to that inner peace is given in one of the letters that Jesus' disciple, Paul, wrote. Do not worry about anything. Let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. How do you get the peace of God, which passes all understanding? You pray and ask God for it. King Solomon, reputedly one of the wisest men who ever lived, wrote many proverbs in what is called the wisdom literature of the Bible. This is one of his most famous ones on this same theme. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. The word for trust in the original language carries the root idea of taking refuge. And the word heart in Hebrew is a holistic word implying the whole of yourself. So to trust in the Lord with all your heart is to take refuge in God with your whole being, to give up trying to control your future or other people's future, and to recognize and accept that our future is in God's hands. When we trust God, we surrender to God, and we accept that whatever the outcome, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, it will ultimately be determined by God. Now that can be scary, because trust is only really trust if things can go wrong. And trust in God does not mean that everything will go the way you want it to go. And it doesn't mean that God will explain everything that's going on in your life. So trust involves overcoming our fears. And we have many fears. Fears of losing something or someone. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of being restricted in some way. I mean, the list is endless. Trust can only be truly trust when you genuinely don't know the outcome. You only know the person you are trusting. And that has to be enough. My young grandson trusts me to catch him if he jumps into my arms. I could drop him, but he trusts that I won't because he knows me. You could say he has faith in me because faith is trust in action, and he's willing to take a risky action based on his trust. But my oldest grandson is a teenager now, and I don't think he would trust me to catch him. He'd probably knock me over because I'm not strong enough. But God is strong enough to catch all of us and hold all of us whenever we need to lean on him. God is good enough and loving enough and trustworthy enough for everyone. Are you willing to jump into God's arms, so to speak? Are you willing to trust God in making your choices? The answer to that will show how well you know God, because it is the people who know God best who can trust God the most. How can you trust in God if you don't know him? Are you willing to put some effort into knowing God better? When you really appreciate the character of God as it is revealed in Jesus, then it becomes a lot easier to cast all your cares on him because you know that he cares for you. The more we focus on Jesus, the more we realize how trustworthy he is. Solomon's wisdom takes things a step further. He says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. That doesn't mean parking your brain or abandoning common sense. It means look to God and his wisdom to be the guiding light in your life, instead of relying on your own incomplete knowledge, imperfect reasoning and flawed judgment. It's foolish to think we can rely on ourselves when we have only limited capabilities. Solomon then goes on to say, in all your ways acknowledge him. In all your ways. That's interesting, because sometimes I find it easier to trust God just for the big things that I know I can't control. But I find it more challenging to trust God in all my ways, in all the smaller everyday things. The Message paraphrase of this proverb says, listen for God's voice in everything you do, everywhere you go. He's the one who will keep you on track. I find that challenging because there are some parts of my life where I'm very happy to let God be God, but there are other areas where I don't really want to listen to God because I want to do my own thing. Are there areas in your life that you might be withholding from God? If you don't give him access to all aspects of your life, how can he help you experience the future he has for you in all things? The promise in this proverb is that if we do acknowledge God in all our ways, he will direct our paths. Now, God respects our free will and choices, but there's a big difference between choosing what to do on your own and choosing what to do having listened to God first. We may make mistakes. I've certainly made many mistakes in my life, but if we have genuinely committed our way to God's first, the promise is that he will direct our paths. A God-directed path won't necessarily be a path that is free from difficulty and maybe even from suffering. We see that in the life of Jesus, but it is the best path for us. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane before his crucifixion had to face that his God-directed path was difficult, and trusting God did not come easy, even for Jesus. The gospel accounts say he sweated blood over it. He pleaded with God that he would not have to drink this cup, as he put it. He asked for an easier way. And it must have been incredibly hard to let go of his will and what he might have thought was an easier way than enduring the awful pain and separation from God on the cross. In a way, I find it comforting to know that Jesus had to make this agonizing journey of letting go of his desire to control, just as I have to, in a lesser way, when I face trusting God in the face of difficulty. A God-directed path is not always an easy path, but it is a path of integrity. It is the best path, and in the end brings us blessing and peace. One of the insights that Jesus' follower Paul wrote in his letter to the Christians living in Rome was that God works in all things for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes. God works through all things, even the difficult and painful things, for our eventual and ultimate good. For Jesus, his God-directed path through death ended in his resurrection and ascension into heaven, a truly glorious end. For us, when we come down to it, the key choice is whether to depend on God or to depend on yourself. And of course, talking about trust is a lot easier than doing it, but the wisdom of Solomon is that it is better to depend on God, it is better to do life together with God than to try to live independently of God. It's good for us to have dreams and goals, but the problems with our dreams is that they can often be about what we can achieve and what we can acquire. In contrast, God's dream for you is focused on the person that you can become. Who we are is more important than what we do. The true outcome of our lives is not our achievements or the way circumstances pan out, but the kind of person we become. Actually, that's one of the things I like about Back to the Future. Marty, the hero, eventually learns to become a better person, a bit wiser, a bit more loving, a bit more at peace with himself and others. The person you become is the only thing that you take into the next life. God's desire for us is that we become a person more like Christ, a person of love and peace. In this three-part series, we've looked at how our reactions to our experiences in the past, how our present choices, and how our attitude to the future can all determine our future life. So what will you do differently as a result. Someone has said that madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And by that definition, a lot of us are mad. We want our future to be different, but we still hold to the same attitudes and habits. What Back to the Future shows us is that different choices are possible, and they can make a huge difference. I haven't got a clue as to what the future holds for me, except this one great promise of Jesus: I will never leave you or forsake you. That means there's no experience in my past where Jesus was not there. He was with me then, He's with me in the present, and there is no door in my life or yours yet to be opened where He is not already there, waiting. What better path to the future could there be than a path directed by God? What better way could there be than trusting God, even if your circumstances on the outside are challenging? A life trusting God is better than trying to make it on your own. Imagine having a heart at peace because you've been able to let go of your anxiety, your fears, and your control to God. That would be a better way to live, a better path to take. Is our future what we make it? No, our future is what God makes it. Make it a good one by putting your trust in God, acknowledging Him, and allowing Him to direct your path. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths.